Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a big one today, Parkinson's disease. We're going way beyond just the basic stuff, really getting into the nitty-gritty with help from some leading sources. We've got the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, the Mayo Clinic, even the Parkinson's Foundation. Should be a good one.
It really is fascinating, There's a lot more to Parkinson's than people realize. Lots of misconceptions floating around.
Yeah, for sure. Like most people, they hear Parkinson's and they immediately think, oh, tremors, right.
Right.
But it's like way more complicated than that.
It is. It is. Parkinson's, it's a neurodegenerative disease. Basically, that means certain brain cells, they start to slowly die off. And with Parkinson's, the cells that are affected, they're the ones that produce dopamine. And dopamine, that's the neurotransmitter. It's super important for smooth, coordinated movement.
Okay, so that's where the tremors come in, right? The stiffness and all those movement-related things. Yeah. But then I was going through some of these sources, and they mentioned all these other symptoms too. Things like losing your sense of smell, problems with sleep, even changes in like thinking and memory. What's up with that?
You've hit on a really important point there. See, a lot of people don't realize that these other symptoms, the non-motor ones, as they're called, they're not just side effects, They're actually a core part of the disease. And here's the thing. They can show up years, sometimes even decades, before any of those motor symptoms even appear.
Whoa, so someone could be having trouble sleeping, or maybe their sense of smell is off, and they wouldn't even think to connect that to Parkinson's.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand the full range of symptoms, not just the ones everyone associates with Parkinson's. The earlier we can detect it, the better. But that brings us to the big question.
The big one, yeah. What actually causes Parkinson's in the first place?
Okay.
Is it our genes? Is it something in the environment?
If we had a clear answer to that, we'd be having a very different conversation. The truth is, for most cases, something like 90%, according to the research, the exact cause is still a mystery. We call those idiopathic cases.
So no smoking gun, at least not for most people.
Exactly, but that doesn't mean we don't know anything. Research suggests it's probably a combination of things, genetics and environment working together. So you might have genes that make you a little more susceptible to developing Parkinson's, but then something in your environment could be the trigger that actually sets it off.
Ah, okay. So it's not as simple as saying this gene equals Parkinson's, or if you're exposed to this one thing, you're doomed.
Not at all. It's way more complicated than that.
And speaking of complicated, the Cleveland Clinic mentioned these things called Lewy bodies. What are those all about?
Lewy bodies, yeah. Those are clumps of a protein called alpha-synuclein. And in Parkinson's, this protein, it misfolds. It's like, imagine a piece of origami that's been folded wrong and now it can't do its job properly.
Okay, so the misfolded proteins, they build up and cause problems.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that these Lewy bodies, they're not just found in Parkinson's, they also pop up in other brain diseases like Alzheimer's. So researchers, they're super interested in figuring out if this alpha-synuclein, if that could be a key to new treatments or ways to diagnose these diseases even earlier.
That's wild. So much we still don't know, which I guess makes the diagnosis tricky too. Speaking of, if someone is worried they might have Parkinson's, how do doctors even figure that out?
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as just a blood test or anything.
Oh.
Doctors look at a bunch of things. They'll go over your medical history with a fine-tooth comb. They'll do a neurological exam, see how you're moving, things like that. And they'll also want to rule out any other conditions that could be causing similar symptoms.
So it's really about connecting the dots, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be your own advocate,
It makes sense being your own advocate, especially with something as complex as this. But let's say someone does get that diagnosis. What happens next? What can they even do about it?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is, while there isn't a cure for Parkinson's, not yet at least, there's actually a lot we can do to manage the symptoms, help people slow down the progression, have a good quality of life.
Okay, so there's hope. That's good to hear. Where do you even start? What are the main treatments?
Usually the first thing we try is medication.
Okay.
And there's one in particular that's the gold standard, levodopa.
Levodopa, yeah, I've definitely heard of that one. But how does it actually work?
Well, you see, dopamine itself, it can't actually cross the blood-brain barrier.
Right.
That's, the brain's security system. But levodopa, it can get through. It's like a Trojan horse. It sneaks in and then, bam, it converts into dopamine right there in the brain.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So it's like delivering the dopamine directly to where it's needed.
You got it. And what's really interesting is it's so effective, especially early on, that if someone doesn't respond well to levodopa, it can actually make doctors rethink the diagnosis. The Mayo Clinic, they actually mentioned that in their materials, it's that important.
Wow, so it can almost confirm if it's really Parkinson's or not, huh? That's amazing. Are there other medications they use too? Besides the levodopa, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. There are these things called dopamine agonists, and those basically mimic what dopamine does in the brain. And then there's COMT inhibitors, which help stop dopamine from breaking down too quickly in the body.
Okay, so it lasts longer.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, it's really about figuring out the best combination for each individual person.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone's different.
Everyone's different, exactly. And it's not just about the movement symptoms either, you know? There are medications that can address the non-motor stuff too, like if someone's having mood swings, they might try antidepressants, or if sleep's a problem, there's always sleep aids.
Right, right. So it's really a holistic approach.
You got it, a holistic approach. But sometimes medication alone, it's not enough. That's when you might start looking at other options, like deep brain stimulation.
DBS, right. I read a little about that.
Yeah, DBS. It's a surgical procedure, and basically they implant a device that sends these little electrical impulses to certain parts of the brain.
The parts that control movement and stuff.
Exactly. So instead of messing with dopamine levels directly, it's more about like fine-tuning the brain's electrical activity. And one thing that's really important to remember is DBS, it's reversible.
Oh, wow. So you can change your mind later on if you need to.
Exactly. It's not like some of those old surgical methods they used to use, which were, well, a lot less flexible.
Yeah, technology's come a long way.
Yeah.
It's amazing what they can do these days.
It really is. And it's just going to keep getting better, too. There's a ton of research going on right now with all these cutting-edge therapies, you know?
Yeah.
Like stem cell therapy and gene therapy.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
There's so much potential there. It's really exciting to think about what the future holds for Parkinson's treatment.
It really is.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, is there anything people can do, in their everyday lives to kind of take control of their symptoms?
Absolutely. All the sources we looked at, they all stressed how important lifestyle is in managing Parkinson's. You know, it's not just about popping pills or having procedures, it's about making healthy choices every day.
Okay, so what kind of choices are we talking about here? What really moves the needle?
Well, for starters, exercise is huge.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about, maintaining mobility and all that, though that's obviously important too. But exercise, it can actually help protect your brain cells, maybe even slow down how fast the disease progresses.
Really?
Yeah.
So working out could be good for your brain even with Parkinson's.
That's what the research is showing, yeah. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, you know? We're not talking about running marathons here. Walking, swimming, dancing, tai chi, yoga, whatever gets you moving and you enjoy doing, that's the key.
It's amazing, isn't it, how much those little things can add up, It seems like with Parkinson's, it's not just about one thing. It's about attacking it from all sides: medication, surgery, lifestyle changes.
Absolutely. It's about empowering people to take control, give them the tools they need to live their best lives, even with Parkinson's. And the really exciting thing is there's so much research going on right now. The future's looking pretty bright, actually.
Right? It seems like every time we do one of these deep dives, there's something new and groundbreaking happening. Like, I was reading about this NIMDS biospecimen exchange. What I thought was so cool about that was it's all about collaboration. Researchers from all over the place sharing their findings and working together.
Oh, absolutely. That kind of collaboration is like essential. The more we can all be on the same page sharing data and insights, the faster we're going to see those breakthroughs. And it's not just about the scientists in the lab either. The Parkinson's Foundation, they really emphasize the importance of, bringing people with Parkinson's into the fold, getting their input on the research.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, who better to tell us what it's really like to live with this disease and what works and what doesn't?
Exactly. It's about combining everyone's expertise, the scientists, the patients, everyone working together towards a common goal.
Love that. Teamwork makes the dream work,
Yeah.
as they say. So for our listeners who are thinking, okay, this is really fascinating, I want to learn more, maybe even get involved, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, honestly, all the sources we looked at for this deep dive, they're fantastic resources. Like the Parkinson's Foundation website, they've got tons of information details on support groups, clinical trials, even ways to get involved in advocacy. It's a great starting point.
Perfect. Because, yeah, the more you know, the better equipped you are to navigate this whole thing.
100%. knowledge is power,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to our health. And hey, the more we can raise awareness about Parkinson's, the closer we get to that future where hopefully it's not something we even have to worry about anymore, right?
Right, a future without Parkinson's, that's something worth fighting for. Well, on that note, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Parkinson's disease. A huge thank you to you, our expert, for walking us through all of this and sharing your insights. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, take care, everybody.